these unintended consequences that are happening, that's what I don't understand. How you can ignore that.
For the second day in a row, Mexican Marines patrolled their side of the Rio Grande in Del Rio, while in La Jolla, Texas, Fox drone cameras were rolling as another group of migrants were apprehended by Border Patrol after crossing illegally. Texas Governor Greg Abbott expressing frustration with the Biden administration's insistence that the border is closed.
I don't know if Secretary Mayorkas and the Biden administration either don't have a clue what's going on or they are purposefully misleading their fellow Americans.
Also in Del Rio stands a half-completed border wall. Construction stopped suddenly in January under President Biden. Chunks are missing. Rebar was left abandoned in the ground, and only a mesh fence now separates the U.S. from Mexico in some spots. The local sheriff here not happy with Washington.
I guarantee you that a fence was left like that around the White House or around some of their homes, they wouldn't tolerate it.
And Shannon, earlier this afternoon, we got some brand new, pretty remarkable numbers from Border Patrol here in the Del Rio sector talking about their apprehension numbers. So here in Del Rio, since October, they've apprehended just over 90,000 migrants. You look at the same time frame last year, that number was only 19,000. So back then, 19,000.
Shameful Biden.
This year, 90,000.
Open borders.
That is a remarkable 377% increase this year. We'll send it back to you.
All right, the story is far from over. We're glad you're down there covering it, Bill. Thank you. Up next, the author of a new book detailing the airliner's dramatic ocean ditching and
things up, exaggerating, and leaving things out.
Brian, I was really surprised, first of all, that The Intercept would even take the time to do a 25-minute sort of hit piece on me and Richie and my coworker Jorge Ventura, because there are so many other actually important news stories going on, right? The border crisis, we have the situation with Israel. There's so many things you could be actually reporting on and pushing the news, and instead they chose to go through our personal Instagram accounts and come up with this politically based narrative that really just fell apart if you watched the whole video and read the article that they wrote.
And Rich, real quick, because I want to get to actual circumstances, but your thoughts. This is video. You're not standing in front of a burning building and telling people what happened. You're telling people to look.
Exactly. At this point, nothing really surprises me in terms of the way the media interprets the video that we put out there. But as the video director at the Daily Caller, my intention is, to use the power of video to actually show everybody in America what's going on in terms of how our civil discourse is actually playing out on the streets.
Riots, looters, and racist criminals.
It's video, so I don't understand how you can.
Black Lives Matter and Antifa.
Don't believe your eyes. This is not happening because we're not showing it. Well, we chose to show it, and they have a problem with that, so they want to take down your credibility. Here's some examples that I'm going to give you an opportunity to sound off on from this Intercept piece. Shelby, this is back in October 2020, protests in Philadelphia. They accuse you of being misleading by focusing on the store being looted instead of the peaceful protest 30 minutes away. Let's watch.
The videographers had to drive 30 minutes away from the protest by Walter Wallace's neighbors in West Philadelphia to film at the retail center in another part of the city, where there were no protesters, only looters taking advantage of the overwhelmed police force.
So we love the harp music in the background. Were you trying to be deceptive?
Listen, Brian, that video that they're showing where I'm not speaking was when I was talking to Tucker Carlson, and I told Tucker Carlson that exact thing. I said that these protests were about 10 miles apart, and it seemed to me that these were opportunistic people. So they basically used exactly what I said to the American public in that piece, but then didn't say that I had said it. So again, it's a joke.
They don't want to show the damage Antifa does. They want to show the grievance they're evidently rising up against. Richie McGinnis, here's you. The Intercept is now pushing the idea that you are holding back video evidence in Kenosha that could hurt Kyle Rittenhouse back in August 2020, who's accused of killing 2 protesters, and we saw this on video as self-protection, it seems, in the Kenosha riots. Let's watch.
McGinnis's phone, which was in his left hand as he administered first aid with his right, was in record mode at the time. That later prompted speculation online that McGinnis, who released no video of the chase or the shooting, might have withheld incriminating visual evidence to shield Rittenhouse.
You hit the wrong button, right? That wasn't recording, correct?
That's correct. And I told Robert as much in an hour-long conversation on the phone. I told him that I was not recording at the time of the shooting. I told him that I cooperated fully with authorities and gave them all of the video that I had from that night. And yet he still posited this insane theory. Shelby Jorge and I, we always try to let our reporting speak for itself. We try not to engage in these kind of intermedia, Twitter battles. But once you accuse me of withholding evidence in a nationally prominent homicide, I think that's a little bit over the line, and that's why we decided to speak up.
The founder of Intercept is Glenn Greenwald. I just want to read you what he tweeted out. This is disgraceful. The Intercept has fallen into some sort of manic phase with their desperation to raise funds from a readership increasingly abandoning them to avoid losing their 501c3 status is causing a level of recklessness and toxicity without limits. But we did want to give you an opportunity to speak up and speak out. And you can read the story, but I'd rather you not. It is tedious. I really appreciate how the courage you guys have shown and the stories you bring forward. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great weekend.
Thanks.
All right. Meanwhile, coming up straight ahead. Why the owner of a bar and grill in Tennessee was denied relief money while women and racial minorities are getting big checks. His problem? And it's a big one. He was born white and male. It's the worst. I know
Discrimination.
People the same way. We're going to talk with a small business owner and find out about his lawsuit straight ahead.
Biden shows racism against whites.
Businesses owned by minorities, women, and veterans first crack at over $28 billion in relief money for the first 21 days of this program to help out restaurants. Privileged white men apparently have to wait. I'm not kidding. Some businesses are sounding the alarm, claiming the policy discriminates based on race and gender. Hello?
Biden's racism and Kamala Harris.
He is suing the administration and joins me live along with his attorney, Rick Eisberg. Hey, Antonio, how has this pandemic treated your business?
Oh man, it's been a rough time. We had to close pretty much the entire month of April last year, and business has been completely slow after that. It started to come back this past summer, but it's just been horrible. We've had a significant loss of income.
What was your reaction when you found out help was on the way? There's a fund out there to help restaurant owners like you.
Yeah, I was thrilled about it, and it was quite a significant amount of money that they told me during the application that I would qualify for, only to fill out the application, get an email from them telling me that I didn't qualify for the first 3 weeks of the program because basically because I'm a white male.
They actually said those words?
No, they didn't say those words. Because you're not a priority group, you're not a minority or a female.
So I want to bring you to, before I bring in Rich, your attorney, I will bring you to the provision in the SBA loan qualifications. It says, small business revitalization says SBA will accept applications from all eligible applicants, but only process and fund priority group applications. Rich, cut through the legalese. What does that mean?
Well, to be in the priority group, you either have to be female or you have to be socially disadvantaged as well as economically disadvantaged. If you look in the law, socially disadvantaged means that you have to be black, Hispanic, Native American, or Asian. So this is an explicit prioritization on the basis of race, and this is something that our Constitution simply does not permit.
Can you imagine if it said, by the way, we're going to prioritize white people first? Can you imagine the outrage? That's the point of your suit. So you are taking a lawsuit now. You're suing the SBA, and one woman in particular about this, and her name is Isabella Casillas.
Well, right. And she's the SBA administrator, and when you sue the federal government, you usually sue the administrator for technical.
And then I'm going to grab something to hold up.
Yeah, we had a little bit of a problem there. Can we get Rich back? Because he was explaining the lawsuit, which is extremely important. So this Isabel Caselli is the executive in charge. So, and she's the defendant in the suit. So, Antonio, are you with us? Are you both back now?
Yeah, I'm here, sir.
Okay. And so, Rich, what's the lawsuit say, essentially?
The lawsuit says that what we have here is an explicit preference for people based upon gender and race. Our law generally does not permit that. In this case, none of the very narrow exceptions are available, so this is unconstitutional, and we're asking the court to put this program on hold.
And I'll tell you what, I hope you win. And Antonio, real quick, I don't think it helps you that you seem to be a conservative. You're selling things like to fund the media, masks are a door to 1984, and socialism distancing. So that really gets under their skin. Listen,
My wife makes those, so yeah, definitely.
well, you got to make a profit, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that want to buy them. Listen, keep fighting.
Think outside the box.
There is justice in this country, and you're going to get it, and you deserve it, and especially restaurateurs all across the country who've been through so much. Keep fighting. Thanks so much, guys.
What a terrible policy.
Coming up straight ahead, with new concerns about critical race theory being taught in America's schools.
And in the schools,
Tonight, parents are being asked if they know
what are they
books their
teaching?
children are being forced to read.
1619
Retired NFL
as the
player,
date of our
podcast
history?
of Benjamin
Nonsense.
Watson, a father
As
of
a history
7,
and government
with that
teacher.
story and so many more.
And I'm the person in Kentucky that taught the first Black history course in the state of Kentucky in 1970. Took the first 2 courses offered at the University of Kentucky, 1968 and 69, with Dr. Stephen Channing, and taught the first Black history course in a public school in Kentucky, and nominated the first Black to be on the Democratic committee in Boone County, Kentucky. What a tragedy to see this being spread into our schools falsely.
How does it feel to have an Angie home?
1776 is the date that we go by in Kentucky and in all the United States of America. Check out the Declaration of Independence and our Constitution. As former superintendent of education for the Commonwealth of Kentucky and the last elected one, I suggest that we eliminate this, trying to force this upon our teachers to teach this false information about America. 1619.
Thank you, On Stop.
My son, is he okay?
Is like it being taught in America's schools, from Black Lives Matter inspired lessons in some cases to students being forced to identify their privilege. Last night, Ivy League professor Glenn Lowry told us why he's pushing back.
I'm weary of the narrative that America is a bandit country, that America is an intrinsically racist country. It's overly simplistic in the extreme. And I'm weary of feeding these children pablum. I'm talking about the 18-year-olds that come to me as freshmen at a place like Brown University. We're supposed to be challenging them to think, not filling their heads with propaganda.
Wow, that was just a little of the interview I found endlessly intriguing. Tonight, my next guest is urging parents to take action. Writing this: do you know what's happening to your kids in the classroom? What books they are reading? What they're being taught? Dads and moms, you have the right to be an active part of your kids' education.
You parents need to be alert.
16-year NFL player, a standout tight end, Super Bowl winner, now the host of Why Are We Not podcast, and author of Under Our Skin. To listen and read, you will definitely learn a lot. Ben, thanks so much for joining us tonight. From looking over your shoulder and talking to your kids and interacting with them at this level, especially in the pandemic where so many families are at home, what are you noticing?
Well, specifically, my assertions are really my assessment of so many of the things that we're talking about, critical race theory, that sort of thing, maybe probably different than many of the viewers and kind of along those lines. But the bigger point, I think, is that parents should be able to, and it's imperative that parents take control of their kids' education. We need to know what our kids are learning. It's our right to learn. It's not the state's job to educate your kids. And so during the pandemic, we're at home with 7 kids, but we've had our kids in private school, public school, Christian school. It didn't matter. But each time they've been in schools, we've gone in, we've looked at the curriculum, and when there was something that did not align with our values, we met with the teachers. And in fact, right, many teachers want that. They want that interaction, but so many parents feel like they can't engage. And we're saying, no, you need to engage. And not only that, it's your right to engage.
Give me an example of something that alarmed you that you took action with.
Well, our kids came home with her. My daughter came home and she was reading a graphic novel that had something to do with gender identity. And so whether the issue is gender identity, whether it is race, whether it is creationism, whatever it is, if your kids have an issue, they learn that eye of discernment at home. And so if we're teaching our kids the truth at home, then they're able to always identify a counterfeit. And so we went in, we met with the teacher, and look, the conversation went great. We were able to remove her from certain things, but we also wanted the right to teach them those things at home. Look, there is an agenda that is going on. Look, every school has it. And that's fine, but as parents, we need to understand that the real learning needs to happen within the four walls of our home. That's not only a burden, so to speak, but it's a responsibility that we have. And it's difficult when we work in those sorts of things, but we are raising the next generation. More importantly than what they learn is how to think is what we teach them at home.
Very true. And real quick, do you worry that people are so critical of the country, they're growing up not loving their country?
You know, I don't. This is something that's been said a lot. I truly believe that we can criticize our country and love her just the same. We can love the fact that we were born here, that we want the country to be better, simply because we call out certain things like racial injustice or whatever it may be. It doesn't mean we hate the country. We can do both at the same time. And quite frankly, that's where I am, and that's where I believe so many other Americans are, but they simply want us to be better.
What a great message to close the show. Ben Watson, always great having you on. You've adjusted to life after football. No one's hitting you anymore, and you look like you're enjoying it. Thanks so much, Ben Watson. Appreciate it. Check out his podcast and buy his book. Thanks, Ben. Hey, meanwhile, I got an announcement for you I'm pretty excited about. And it is a book that's coming out this November, and it is The President and the Freedom Fighter, How Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass Combined Efforts to Save America's Soul. I think it's the type of message that, well, I know I just loved looking at it for the last 2.5 years and studying it. There's still a lot more to know. I hope you watch Fox and Friends over the weekend from 6 to 10 and 6 to 10 again. Listen to my radio show Monday through Friday. And catch me Monday back on Fox and Friends. Will Kane will be here on Monday. Tucker Carlson is next. Cue the drums.
They could be exposed. So if you're taking your kids to the grocery store or somewhere else,
Fake
try to
news.
go at a time when there aren't a lot of people around. And if there are a lot of maskless people walking around, you suspect that some of them could actually be unvaccinated. Maybe leave and come back later.
Okay, well then there's the problem right there. People lie. It's human nature. Not everyone who's not wearing a mask has actually been vaccinated. You just can't tell. Unvaccinated people are like Russian spies. They circulate stealthily among the rest of us, pretending to be something they're not, committing medical treason, undermining this nation from within. It's terrifying when you think about it. But wait a second, you ask, why would someone who's been vaccinated worry at all about encountering an unvaccinated person, masked or not? Isn't the vaccinated person entirely safe from COVID infection? Isn't that the whole point of getting the vaccine in the first place? And honestly, that is a fair question. Unfortunately, we're not in a position to answer that question. We're not physicians. We're not practicing MSNBC anchors. We just don't have the data. But for reference, take a look at this perfectly well-adjusted couple on a cable news morning show. They've been fully vaccinated, but they plan to keep wearing their masks anyway. Why? Because it's just common sense.
If you're on airplanes, if you're on buses, if you're on public transportation, wear the mask. You still are expected to wear the mask. And actually, for your own health, you should still wear the mask. I got to say, in the future, I mean, I haven't gotten the flu in a year.
Mask crazy.
Stop wearing a mask on planes. That just makes good common sense.
It's a good idea. It's just common sense. It's just common sense because masks protect you, not simply from COVID-19, but from everything, including from the flu. They're like magic that way. We ought to wear them forever. So you're headed over to Amazon to throw 10,000 surgical masks in the old shopping cart. But before you do, ask yourself, do we know that's true? I mean, we should check. Trust but verify. Someone's got to have those numbers, right, on masks. Someone must have checked. Well, in fact, someone has checked. Last year, the peer-reviewed journal of the British Medical Association took a look at the effectiveness of cloth masks. Those are the kind that MSNBC anchors wear on airplanes. They're the ones you see at Whole Foods. Surprisingly, there wasn't a lot of data on their effectiveness. The authors could find only a single randomized clinical study of the subject, in other words, a scientifically valid study. But the results of that study are worth knowing about. It turns out that people who wear cloth masks are at, quote, higher risk of viral infection than people who don't wear cloth masks. The masks turned out to be completely ineffective. In testing, cloth masks allowed the penetration of 97% of vapor droplets. But actually the masks were worse than that. They weren't just useless, they turned out to be dangerous. They were literally vectors for disease. Quote, Cloth may become damp and contaminated, posing an infection and self-contamination risk. Oh, so it turns out, according to the study, people who wore the kinds of masks that MSNBC anchors plan to wear in airplanes when they fly commercial, those people were more likely to get the flu, to get infected, than people who weren't wearing the masks. That's amazing. Why have we heard about that study before? You know, because it was a study with math and stuff. Old school science where you test your hypotheses and then don't lie about the results of the tests. In other words, it was racism. And we can't have that. If we're going to beat this pandemic, we're going to need fewer studies and more punitive measures. Watch this public health expert on MSNBC today explain.
For all of the companies in America who say they want a better society, and they say it all the time, the one thing they actually could do, which they have been unwilling to do thus far, is to actually mandate vaccination. It baffles me to this day, given the trillions of dollars that was pumped out directly to businesses to help them during the pandemic, that the one thing they've been unwilling to do thus far is to help themselves and to help society by mandating the vaccine.
Well, yeah, it's pretty simple. Don't make the case. Don't convince people. It's not like they're citizens. They're just peasants. Force them. Why aren't big companies mandating vaccines and punishing people who won't get the shot? It's a fair question. And while we're on the topic, why aren't the NIH and the CDC doing the very same thing? A report just tonight suggests that up to half of NIH and CDC employees have refused to get the vaccine so far. Whoa. Who knew there were so many QAnon science deniers in science? As the MSNBC guy might say, it's baffling. But Jeb Bush's former flack is not baffled. She knows what the problem is. The problem is you've got too many rights, buddy.
I mean, why is it controversial for, I mean, I understand, you know, a right to privacy and a right to freedom, but I don't have a right to go to my workplace unvaccinated. I don't have a right to send my kid to school without testing him to make sure he doesn't become a vector for disease. I mean, has this debate gone too far in the, I mean, people, sure, you can do what you want, but it doesn't mean you get to go on with your pre-pandemic life if you're not willing to carry your burden in society.
Why is it controversial? Well, exactly. You do it because you're a good person. You need to get vaccinated because if you don't get vaccinated, you might infect people who have been vaccinated. And how unfair would that be? It's not like abortion or something. You just don't have the right to do that. Now, some are claiming that this new standard is confusing, but it's not. That's a conspiracy theory. Shut up. Nothing could be clearer than the science on COVID. Get vaccinated. Joe Biden said it this week. Hurry up and get the shots. And while we're at it, vaccinate your entire family, including any child over the age of 5 months. Now, your kids may be more likely to be killed by cheetahs than killed by COVID, but it's still incredibly dangerous not to vaccinate them as often as you can right away. And by the way, they can't get an education or have friends who go to summer camp if they don't get the shot, so just do it. And then, and this is the key, so listen carefully, once you have all been thoroughly vaccinated, you must live as though you haven't been vaccinated because although the vaccine is 100% effective and therefore essential, actually it doesn't work at all. It's pretty much a saline solution, but with potentially fatal side effects. So take the vaccine, but do not trust the vaccine. Damn the CDC guidance. And the next time you're outside with your spouse, for example, is to prove you're on the same page. Your spouse, keep in mind, the person you're legally married to, the person you sleep with, the person who, like you, has been fully vaccinated. The next time you're outdoors with that person, be certain to wear at least one mask before you kiss her sexlessly in the driest, falsest way possible, especially if there are network camera pools present. Otherwise, if you fail to take these obvious, common-sense health precautions...
We done broke that rule.
Vice President Kamala Harris herself demonstrated this guidance recently. And it applies to all of us. You may kiss the bride. Sure, I will. But with the mask on, there's nothing confusing about this. But that doesn't mean that these rules are set in stone. They must be observed, but they can be expanded. As with Mosaic law, the pious will want to build from Archbishop Fauci's edicts. Father Fauci says to wear a mask over your face, and that's fair, of course, it's your duty. But especially good people might want to upgrade from there, from a mere mask to a plastic bag. Same civic-minded spirit behind the project, but a lot more of it. Plastic is far less permeable than cotton, therefore it's safer. We dare a COVID germ to sneak through plastic. Go ahead, try it, COVID. You can't. But for some out there, even conventional plastic might not be enough. It might not be good enough in a moral sense. Would you really trust your life to a sandwich baggie or a dry cleaning bag? Probably not. So the truly pious will want to go even farther than that, and good for them. They'll go with hefty garden bags or the higher grade contractor version that demolition crews use to haul drywall off construction sites. Tightly secured, of course, with bungee cords and electrician's tape around the neck. Because it's about safety. It's about sensible, common sense precautions. And for responsible people who follow those precautions with the contractor bags, life can finally return to normal. People like that can roast all the hot dogs they please on July 4th. People like that are patriots. And by the way, they're not doing this for themselves. They're not suffocating for themselves alone. They're doing it for all of us. They're storming the beaches of COVID so the rest of us could live as intended in a fully obedient country. Call them heroes. Call them martyrs, actually. They've earned it. CNN is going to celebrate these people in a primetime special, probably posthumously. These are the brave Americans who believed in science. Anderson Cooper presents The Ultimate Sacrifice for Public Health. It's coming. So several states, including New York and Hawaii, are still, in the face of this new CDC guidance, refusing to relax their mask mandates. Nancy Pelosi is on board with that. She's refusing to relax the mandates in the House of Representatives, and she can do that. Yesterday, Florida Congressman Brian Mast defied that order.
Madam Speaker, as the member designated for the representative from Florida, Brian Mast, I ask that given the updated CDC guidance, we all take off these stupid masks.
So Brian Mast, standing on science, spoke the truth. And for that, he was threatened with a fine for being maskless on the House floor. We have reached out to Nancy Pelosi's office, and you won't be surprised to learn they blew us off and declined comment. But Congressman Brian Mast did agree to come on tonight, and we're happy to have him with us now. Congressman, thanks so much for coming on. Before I ask you why every Republican in the House who's been vaccinated didn't follow suit and do what you did, let me ask you why you did what you did.
I'm just not going to play her stupid game that falls somewhere between dog and pony show, smoke and mirrors, and pure manipulation. That's why.
So you've been vaccinated. The science, as communicated by the CDC this week, current state of it is that you do not need to wear a mask because you're not going to get COVID, because that's why you got the vaccination in the first place. What is her position? What is her argument? Why is she threatening to fine you for following CDC guidance?
Because they want control. They want control of everybody. And let's put the perspective on this. The person third in line to the presidency is saying this in the House of Representatives: if you don't wear a mask, even though the CDC said you definitely don't need to wear one, and science supports that, you should be fined $500 for the first offense and $1,000 every time thereafter. And probably the reason everybody doesn't follow suit is because they don't want to be fined $500 and $1,000 respectively.
So how many Republicans are going to follow your lead into morally justified civil disobedience in the face of tyrannical, stupid, and honestly deranged requirements like this one? How many others do you think will do what you've done?
You know, I think come Monday, you're going to see everybody toss their masks in the air like graduates are tossing their hats in the air and say, we're just not going to follow Speaker Pelosi's tyrannical rule here.
I got to ask you, I mean...
And they should not follow it. Ridiculous.
The mental health crisis that is clearly hurting America. We're watching a mental health crisis here, and I'm wondering how many of the people who are still wearing masks after having been vaccinated, after reading the CDC guidance telling them not to wear masks, how many of them, sincere question, are suffering from some form of diagnosable mental illness?
Well, you got to ask yourself, are you going to use science as just a tool to support whatever your agenda is? Or are you actually going to take it for what it is? Are you going to use it when it supports or doesn't support whatever your hypothesis is? And if you're not going to use it in both circumstances, then you're just not being honest. You're not being true. You're not being just. And that's clearly a problem for anybody, especially somebody that's a part of representative government. And I'd make one more point on this just quickly, and that's to say this. Let's see if they use the same fervor about protecting yourself when it comes to us physically protecting ourselves, say personally, with our firearms or things like that. I don't think it will apply for them in the same situations.
Let me ask you one last quick question. The science suggests that people who've recovered from COVID and have high levels of antibodies are in fact safer from reinfection than people who've taken the vaccine. There are 100 million of those people in this country. Why are they wearing masks?
Well, because they're forced to. Because when you go to the grocery store, they force you to or they don't let you in. When you go to the airport, they force you to or they don't let you in. That's the place that they want to get to force you to disclose your health information, or else you will be fined or you won't be allowed into somewhere. And if your health information doesn't show that you got the vaccine that they want you to get, and who knows what other vaccines they'll want you to get into the future, then you won't be able to rejoin society, because that's what they will mandate. That is the control.
Time to stop playing along, and thank you for leading the way on that. Congressman Brian Mast of Florida. Appreciate it.
All the best.
The Pentagon has confirmed this is real. We'll show you that tape and talk to someone who can assess what it means. That's straight ahead. We've interviewed a number of experts on the show, people familiar with footage in the possession of the U.S. military, who have said there is tape out there of unidentified flying objects descending from the sky and then disappearing into the ocean. Well, today, that video emerged. The Pentagon has just confirmed that the footage is real. You're seeing it now on your screen. It was taken by the Combat Information Center on board the USS Omaha on July 15th, 2019, off the coast of San Diego. As far as we know, the UFO in question was never recovered. There was no material indicating a crash. More than that, we don't know. Tom Rogan is a Washington Examiner columnist, well-versed in the subject. He joins us tonight. Tom, what do you think we're looking at here?
Well, I think we may well be looking at a true unknown, which is to say intelligently controlled machinery that is not understood to be in the possession of the United States, China, or Russia, which are the three most advanced countries in terms of military aviation. And so, you know, the video in and of itself is limiting what it can tell us, but I think it speaks to, as the Pentagon itself has admitted, this continuing trend of truly unexplained things coming into the public consciousness more than they have before.
If you listen to this with the sound up, you can hear the guys who are monitoring this video in real time gasp when it seems to disappear beneath the waves. So this kind of takes the weather balloon off the table, or some meteorological phenomenon off the table. I mean, clearly we're looking at something that is, as you just put it, being intelligently controlled, and it's going underneath the ocean and then disappearing. I mean, we're sure that this could not be a foreign nation.
Yeah, that is yes, and that is why you see people like Senator Rubio leaning into the subject. The military Office of Naval Intelligence, which really leads the military effort researching this. There isn't anything that we have top secret information about what China or Russia have, or what we have at Area 51 that can do what these things do in terms of the variable performance. And I think specifically relevant to this video, in the coming months and years, an area which we will learn more about is the interaction of US Navy submarines, nuclear ballistic missile submarines and attack submarines, picking up sonar contact of things moving at hundreds of knots under the water. And so there is a undersea dimension to this that the Navy has sort of pushed off to the side as the pilots talk more about their experiences. So there's a lot more to come out, I think, is the best way to put it.
Hundreds of knots underwater. I mean, I think all of us can imagine objects moving at incredible speeds in the air, maybe even approaching, you know, the speed of light, potentially. But hundreds of knots underwater, I don't think most people can even digest that. And that's been recorded?
That's what I've heard from sources, very good sources, and that the Navy has the data. And one of the big things, Tucker, that I think as we move towards this Director of National Intelligence report, and I do know that the various agencies are actually taking that more seriously than people might expect, as is DNI. One of the things we're going to find is that over a period of decades, a lot of the data, a lot of the measurement of these things has been put off as technical aberration or essentially a data malfunction, because they didn't want to really admit that something very serious and special is going on.
I mean, some of this behavior challenges our understanding of physics, so I think this is going to change a lot of perceptions. Tom, I appreciate it. I hope we'll see you again soon.
Thanks, Tucker.
So now we're learning the Department of Justice, and this is a surprise, has been hiding from public view a lot of video footage from that day. Why would they hide it from the public? What's in that footage? We'll tell you next. So one of the ways you know the people in charge are lying is when they say something that's clearly not true, and then they keep saying it at increasing volume over time and demanding that you repeat it or else they're going to hurt you. You've seen that a lot since January 6th, which was, they'll remind you daily, a dangerous white supremacist insurrection as part of the QAnon army.
Wrong.
Just today, Don Lemon over on CNN described January 6th as a war with, quote, hand-to-hand combat.
I spoke with a Republican lawmaker last night, and he told me during the commercial
This
break,
guy's
he
a
said, "Listen, I
phony.
fought in
Fake news.
war, Denver Wriggle," and he said, I went to war, and he said, the difference is that I didn't have people denying the realities of war or denying my experience. And what happened at the Capitol was nothing less than war. As I said, hand-to-hand combat.
Nonsense.
They bring the drama, these people. It's unbelievable. So if they're going to beat you over the head with the same storyline for 4 months, you think it's fair to ask, like, what are the details? Who shot Ashley Babbitt, for example, and why aren't you telling us? And where's the rest of the footage of this deadly white supremacist QAnon insurrection? But they're not sharing the footage, and that's very strange. The Capitol Hill Police Department's general counsel is arguing in court that releasing more surveillance footage from January 6th would help, quote, those who might wish to attack the Capitol again. Right. The DOJ is making the same arguments. Why are they withholding this footage?
They don't want us to know the truth.
This subject more carefully than maybe any other reporter. She's a senior contributor to American Greatness. We're happy to have her on tonight. Julie, thank you for coming on. So how much, do we have any idea how much of this footage they're hiding from the public, what it might show, and why they're hiding it?
So according to the general counsel for the Capitol Police, there are 14,000 hours of surveillance video from January 6th, just between noon and 8 o'clock that day. The Capitol Police captured this video from its extensive surveillance system, both inside and outside the Capitol. So 14,000 hours they have that would show what happened before, during, and of course after the insurrection. And they are refusing to release it, as you said, saying that this will cause the insurrectionists to plot yet another attack on our democracy. And also federal prosecutors, Joe Biden's Justice Department, and federal judges are going along with this. So what are they trying to hide? I mean, if this was war, if this was like, you know, Pearl Harbor and 9/11, don't you think that they would want to show the American people all of this footage that they have of these horrible human beings, you know, attacking the citadel of our democracy? So it raises a lot of questions. And to your point, Tucker, the hyperbolic rhetoric around this should really give people pause and make them reconsider the narrative that we've been told from the very beginning about what January 6th was all about.
Right.
You know, it's
And they should not have even let it happen. They should have called in the National Guard, which the President Trump had standing by. But Mayor Bowser and Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer refused to call in the help. Or this would have never have happened.
And not say who did it or on what basis it was done. Do we know any answers to those questions?
We don't, Tucker. Her family has filed a lawsuit against Capitol Police and I believe the Justice Department. They're trying to get answers about what happened. It's important to note that the only person who had a firearm in the Capitol that day was the unidentified police officer who shot and killed an unarmed veteran.